folks. Welcome in. We're back after a week break for Hockey Talk Tuesday, and what a show to get to tonight on a Tuesday evening, the final one in October. Isaac Petcash, Ryan Zapolsky. We were at the same location last week. We just weren't here doing the podcast, Ryan. Right. At Zubu, how'd the kiddos like it? Were they a fan?
Yeah, they loved it. That's what they look forward to all year, is getting to the Halloween costume. So it was a good time. And now 2 days away from trick-or-treating, so they're really excited for this week.
Do you guys stay at home and pass out candy? Do you go through your neighborhood? Like, what's the normal plan for Halloween?
No, we actually go over to my wife's parents' neighborhood. The houses are really close together there, so they get a lot of options, a lot of houses to hit up. So that's what we'll do for Thursday night. You guys the same or?
Yeah, we're going to go to my wife's parents, my mother-in-law's, because they have a neighborhood, like a cul-de-sac right behind Edinburgh University. But it's always interesting because I grew up on a street that wasn't really akin to passing out candy. It was a main road, right, and the next house was like a mile and a half down the road. So I never really trick-or-treated. I just kind of went to – normally I'd go to the high school and just help pass out candy. But it's cool to get to see – the little kids do it. And I will admit, I still have the Zubu candy bag in the back of my car, and my son and I have been like periodically picking at the candy. So I don't know how long it's going to last, but it's kind of funny we were there on the same night.
I know that was cool. We got to put ours away because every single time they pass, ours is actually in our kitchen table, and every time they pass the kitchen table, they ask for candy. So ours is going away after Thursday for sure.
I feel the same way, man. It's not easy, especially when you have little kids, and that stuff's always prevalent and always around. Halloween, though, is on Thursday. We got a lot of spooky stuff to talk about tonight, namely the Pittsburgh Penguins, which we'll get to in a bit on this episode. When we talked a couple weeks ago, they were okay, 500, and since then things have fallen off a cliff. They're in progress right now. We're going to talk whether or not Mike Sullivan should be gone as a Pittsburgh Penguin head coach. And then we'll talk Sabres as well, specifically their goaltending. They can score now, it seems, can Buffalo, but now the goaltending is a little bit of a concern. And so we'll talk about a little bit about that on this episode as well. Wherever you're watching, however you may be taking us in, welcome in again. We're on YouTube, Twitch, X, and Facebook on this Tuesday night here on the Gem City Sports Network, part of our Hockey Talk Tuesday podcast series. But I want to start with the Otters, as we always do, Ryan, because we talk a lot about them. Of course, you were part of the team last weekend in a back-to-back loss to the Kitchener Rangers. And it was so interesting because your division record was pretty standout coming into the weekend. You had already beaten Kitchener earlier in the season, and it looked like things were rolling okay. And then the defense just struggled. Now keep in mind, I know we talked a little bit off air. Ty Challenger, Lucas Ambrosio, both gone with the U17s, but a little bit of a concerning weekend defensively. What do you make of the two games against Kitchener in which you got one out of a possible 4 points?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's more probably attested to just like a tough stretch of games. I mean, there was 6 games in 10 days or something like that. So it's just a grind of a stretch, and that was just kind of the tail end of it. I wouldn't read too far into that. I think overall, both of those games were actually winnable as well. Obviously didn't go our way. A couple mistakes later in those games, or especially Saturday night, kind of letting that one go after we tied it up late. But no, I mean, I think overall the team's in a good spot. I think we're starting to score a little bit more. That was something that we really wanted to focus on. Playing really well 5-on-5, I feel, as well. So it's obviously early in the year. You want to win those games, but you're playing 3-3. The first 2 on the road. That's a lot of travel. That's tough on the guys. So I thought they handled it pretty well Saturday and really stuck to the game plan. Didn't get the 2 points, but got the 1, so that was important. But overall, I think the team's it's in a good spot. I mean, there's no concerns, I think, from us internally right now.
And again, I think when you look at the weekend in particular, we had talked a lot about on the show, Ryan, about the depth scoring, right? And how you would have to find different guys, maybe minus like the top 3 or 4 that scored. And although it was mostly the top guys who scored over the weekend, a lot of different goal scorers, right? Alfano had a goal on Saturday. Pano Femus comes up with 2. And then your goal scorers on Friday, the likes of Gabe Frasca and Malcolm Spence, who we'll get to Spence in a second. He's playing out of his hair. It was... Maybe Stan Butler did this on purpose. He probably didn't, because I don't know if he watches this or not. Hopefully you do, Stan. If you are, drop a comment, leave a like. But we talked about the Edwards, Femus, Alfano line, how we thought it was one of, if not maybe the best line in the OHL, right? Just from a continuity standpoint, from the fact that these guys have different skill sets and it allows them to play well together. Well, then Stan Butler shuffles up the lines. and now all of a sudden you have Edwards and Alfano and Vemus playing on different lines. Is that just to try to figure out different scoring types? Is it because Stan Butler didn't think that they were the best together early in the year? What do you make of the changing of the lines and why you think that line got broken up?
Yeah, I mean, I think just trying different things early on. There's nothing really. I think we know when that those three are together. They're pretty dominant, but struggles that the team I think saw towards the end of last year in the playoffs is just that depth scoring and finding different combinations, getting some younger players playing on the top lines with different guys. It's more about a feeling it out. That's what the beginning of the season is always that way. I find anywhere you really go, you're going to see some movement along among lines. Even in game too. Mix things up. Maybe some combinations aren't working. And it might not be that line specifically that wanted to move. Maybe it's some other lines that were struggling where they wanted to kind of mix in an Edwards in that line or Femus with that line. We obviously have a lot of depth, a good depth up the forward position. We have 9 or 10 guys that can score on any night, so that's a really positive thing that we have. It's not necessarily that line specifically needed to be moved around. It's just like you said, I think just trying to find different combinations, different things that are going to work. I think I lost you there.
My mic's muted. That's why.
Yeah.
Silly me. I run this podcast network and I still can't sometimes figure out the technology. One of the things that I think was interesting, what Stan Butler did is moving down Dylan Edwards and then moving to the top line, Malcolm Spence, who we expected a lot to play with Gabe Frasca. And I actually talked about the fact that I don't know if that marriage necessarily is perfect because the two like to play a similar style of game and maybe they would be best off on two different lines. I think the Malcolm Spence thing is interesting because to me, and I know we can talk about his individual accolades of what he's been able to do, now with multiple games in a row that he's been able to find the net and find goals up until the game on Saturday. But I wonder too, if with Malcolm Spence up there on the top line with Alfano and Femus, it's not something you see every day. And I think Stan Butler, to me, this is kind of the mold of what he is, right? He wants to be a rugged, tough team that's hard to play against, that can grind ways out. And now you have two big guys with Alfano and Spence on the first line. I almost wonder if you make that line knowing that this is now sort of the identity, Ryan, that you want to take as a team. And I know they want to score goals. I know you guys are looking to be able to fill the net, but I think it says a lot about what Stan Butler's moxie is in putting two big guys on the top line who, yes, can score, but also can hit around people if necessary. And I just want to get your thoughts if that's something that you've seen just from Stan in terms of, is he trying to implement the style that worked really well for him in North Bay? And if so, what that might look like moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe a little bit that's probably on track. I mean, it really comes out. Malcolm Spence, he's a player that you can really put anywhere in the lineup, but he's gonna produce. He's gonna get the best out of those guys. And I think the Femus and Alfano, they're really good complement of each other. Just a smaller guy, skilled fast player playing with a bigger guy that can go dig pucks out. And now you got two guys that can do that and get the puck back to Pano. And it comes down to, I think, again, Malcolm's a player. He creates in a lot of different areas of the ice, entering the zone. When he uses speed, when he uses size, he's a really, really tough player to play against. And that really frees up those other two guys. So, yeah, I mean, those are guys that you really want to lean heavily on. But establishing that with that top line, a team that's tough to play against, that wants to get the puck deep, wants to go get it back to, and is willing to go into those dirty areas. When you see that top line, a line that's going to be on the ice more often than the others, that's kind of the identity you try to establish and hope that kind of trickles down to the rest of the lineup. And even on second, third line guys, even fourth line guys, we have some big bodies there that are going to be able to do that same thing and just be a tough team to play against. That's really what it comes down to. When you establish that kind of identity on that top line, your scoring line can do that too. That really is that's also a line that can be matched up defensively against other teams' best players too, where they're not going to want to come on the ice and play against you. They're going to be like, seeing those guys on the ice, they're not going to want to go into those dirty areas and dig pucks out. So that's for sure. I think part of the plan and making sure we're a team that's you don't want to come in and play us every night, because we're going to be a difficult team to match up against.
Let's talk Malcolm Spence, because he's second on the team in goals. He's tied for second with the team in points. Femus and Alfano were tied for first at 17, but this guy up until Saturday had found the net in 4 straight games. And I thought, going into the end of last season, that he was touted as a high prospect, right? He was the second overall pick for a reason when the Otters took him. But I never felt like he was living up to the potential that he could have been. I almost viewed him as like a Dylan Strome prototype, right? He's a tall, lanky guy who can play center, but he's almost a better winger who can score, but also have good puck control. I just didn't know if he was finding his stride all the way up until the beginning of this season. Do you think he's found his stride, Ryan? What about Malcolm's game do you think has helped him to grow? Because it's clear that there is a maturation to his game this season, especially in the last 3 weeks. And I'm just curious to see from your perspective on the bench what that might look like for you.
Yeah, I think for him, it's just, understanding the way he's the most successful, like where he has the most success, I think, on the ice. And that's when he gets to the physical side of his game. And he uses speed to beat guys wide. He's not afraid to get to the net. When he's trying to play a little bit too outside, make the fancy plays, he can do that, but that's not really where he's going to be the most effective player for us. So I think he understands that, he's maturing as a player. He's, he knows going to this year, it's a really important year for him, obviously his draft year, but he's also got a couple of seasons under his belt in this league. So he knows how to play the game. He gets coached really well, I think, from our coaching staff as well, where they're letting him know like what the type of player he needs to be every night, what kind of mentality he has to bring into the game. And he's just maturing that way. I mean, it just comes with age. It comes with like playing the experience of playing on a nightly basis in this league. You learn the things that work for you. And I think he realized that, maybe something clicked the first or second week where he knew that this is where he's going to be the most effective player. And again, that's just really using that speed, that big body he has, getting wide, entering the zone, and then going to the net, not being afraid to get in those dirty areas. So that's where he's really the most effective.
And being on the top line as a reward, he goes away from Gabe Frasca. I think him and Alfano have actually really complemented each other. I don't know if I've ever seen two big forwards be able to play as well together, in terms of the way they dance together. I know that sounds like a weird term, but I just think that they're a bit more crafty than maybe what their game shows, and I think that that's shown so far. And look, for Sam Alfano, I mean, kudos to Dave Brown, clearly, for pulling the trigger last season and making that trade to get Sam. He has been tremendous since coming to Erie over from London. So big props to the Otters and him continuing to make strides on the first line of things. I want to talk about a guy because I believe he can turn his game around. I think he's too talented not to. But Carey Terrance so far this season has really struggled. And again, not really factoring on the score sheet, just 5 points, 2 goals so far in 12 games played. Is it just a slump? Is it his mind on other things? Take me, if you would, Ryan, just from your perspective, to the mind of Carey Terrance, because I think we all believe he can turn his game around, no question. It's not often that we see this guy who is this talented prospect that, of course, is probably going to be a staple of the Anaheim Ducks at some point in the next few years, and now the team captain not playing to the likes of which he normally is. So what about Carey do you think has led to these struggles?
Yeah, I mean, I think Carey, he's a player that's kind of he's a versatile player as well. He's had a lot of different line mates, I think, up until this point. I don't actually find his game to be missing at all. It's just maybe it's not showing up on the score sheet. I think if you watch his game, he's getting plenty of chances. They're just not going to the net for him right now. So I think that's going to come. I think for him, it's more so don't want to kind of sway away from what's gotten you successful up to this point and what makes you a strong player. He's obviously taking on more of a leadership role as the captain this year as well. He kills penalties. He does a little bit of everything. He's really rounding out his game, I find, all 3 zones a little bit more than he has in the past. He's become a really reliable defensive player. And I think the scoring is going to come. And I know you're a high draft pick in the NHL. You expect yourself to be a point a game player probably in this league at this point, and he's just a little bit under that. I think for him, and he understands this too, he's a really smart player. Just making sure he's not really changing too much in his game. And I think if he continues to play the way he has, even though it's not, reflecting on the score sheet, I think those stats will come for him eventually. That's my personal opinion of watching him play. If you look at, expected goals for him, that to me, that shows he's creating a lot of chances and he's in the right areas. It's just not going in for whatever reason. I think when that happens though, as it kind of trickles and you start thinking about it a little bit too much, you grip your stick a little bit tighter. You're hoping and praying some pucks go in. And that's a tough way to play. But I think once he's going to have a game here coming up pretty soon where he's going to have 2 points or 2 or 3 points, a couple goals. maybe 4-point night where it's just going to flip on for him. It's going to turn it all around. He'll be the player he expects to be from from a producing perspective as well.
So then I'm curious because you bring up an interesting point. Again, you look at his score tally, and as people who watch maybe from afar and who haven't been to as many games think, okay, he's struggling, and even people like myself who could be falling into the trap, right? He's not putting the puck in the back of the net. He's expected to do that, and so maybe that's a concern. But you mentioned the 200-foot game, and I think it was likely we figured he'd come back to Erie this season. There wasn't, I don't think, a drastically high likelihood that he would have gone to Anaheim. Is that something that the Ducks wanted to see? Is it something of, hey, we want you to be able to play a more 200-foot game? And is Carey just a guy who they want to be that, potential 200-foot center who doesn't necessarily have to score all the time? Is that kind of why you think maybe it's taking him a while to score, because he's working out the other kinks in his game?
I can see that for sure. I mean, I don't know what was maybe communicated to him from the Ducks when he left, but that wouldn't shock me at all. They want him to make sure he rounds out the rest of his game. See, if you watch him play, he's a really strong skater. He's a big guy. He takes critical faceoffs. That's something that I think as an NHL player, like most players that are at this level, they do a lot of things well and a couple things extraordinarily well. Those are the guys you see that are stars in the NHL that really stand out in 3 or 4 different areas. But most guys can really do most zones. They play it well enough. I think he's really trying to improve all 3 of those areas and find what he does the best, and really focus on that. But I think rounding out your game is something that at this point of his career, if he can really establish himself as a strong 200-foot player, he's a player that's going to get him to the NHL. I think more than, hey, if he goes and scores 90 points this year but struggles defensively, might not have the same effect as if he's a 75-point guy, but he's a plus 20 player. He's playing 20 minutes a night. He's killing penalties. He's at the critical points of the game. I think that's really where he's kind of focusing his game and making sure he kind of gets there, and he's probably willing to sacrifice some points early on to kind of get to that point.
Otters coming up on Friday at Brampton on the road again, and then back home Saturday against Barrie, 2 non-division opponents, sitting at 6 wins on the year, sitting 6 points behind the first place team in their division, and still in a spot early on where they are making decent strides. And of course, as we know, it's a long season, still got plenty of time left. But good stuff from the Otters. Again, Malcolm Spence playing well, to Ryan's point. Carey Terrance trying to work out all parts of his game and get that much better as the team captain. We didn't really even get to Noah Erliden, but we'll get to him because I think we talk about him nearly every week. Let's flip the script here, Ryan, as we continue along on the Hockey Talk Tuesday podcast. It is, of course, on the Gem City Sports Network, wherever you're watching. However you may be taking us in, live on Facebook, live on X, live on YouTube, live on Twitch. As we sit here and do this podcast, maybe you're watching because you're just sick and tired of being sick and tired of the Pittsburgh Penguins and watching them flounder in the way that they are floundering. Currently in progress against the Minnesota Wild, a 2-0 lead became a 4-2 deficit, and now Pittsburgh trails 4-3 in this game. I'll just ask you straight up, Ryan, if they lose tonight with Marc-Andre Fleury back in the building, is Mike Sullivan done as Penguins head coach? I feel like we ask this question every single week.
I know. And then they'll lose, and then he'll stick around for another 3 days, and then they'll go and they'll win 2 games, and they can't get rid of him after he wins a game. But I don't know what they're waiting for at this point. I mean, if you look at that road trip they just went on the last, I think they're on a 5-game losing streak. The main concern to me is the fact that they're getting leads in all these games. I think they were up 2 goals in Vancouver, 2 also maybe in Calgary. And they're blowing these leads, and then they had a late lead in Vancouver too, where they let it go late. And then I think they lost it overtime or shootout, or maybe even, I don't know if that's Vancouver, but either way, like the fashion that they're losing, that to me is a sign that we've talked about this for almost probably 2 years now. Like, he's losing some players' interest, and he's not getting the best out of his guys. When you're losing games like that, you're blowing leads. That's a big concern for me. So yeah, I mean, I think for sure if you lose tonight and you lose against Anaheim at home in 2 days, that's it. I think if they lose tonight, they'll probably keep him around again for a couple games. Just seems like, he's a good coach. He's had success, but it just seems like Kyle Dubas is more so like he doesn't like firing his coaches midseason. So I want to tell you, yeah, they're going to fire him if they lose tonight. I don't think they will. I think if they keep him around, they lose to Anaheim, they fire him for sure.
It's scary for me in a couple of aspects, and the two things that I point to tonight that I think are the one is a panic move, the other is something that I'm just noticing that's really not prevalent. I think when Mike Sullivan came into Pittsburgh, it was all about the fact that he could take the youth that he coached in Wilkes-Barre and bring them up
Mhm.
and have them have immediate success. And when you look at the team currently, now granted they're one of the oldest teams in the league, I understand that. But
Yeah.
you look at the young guys per se that are supposed to be playing well. Drew O'Connor is the first guy I point to, right? Who's been put on the first line a couple of nights, and whatnot. 3 goals, 4 points all season long. He's a -8. He has not
Yeah.
played to his potential. Jack St. Ivany is a -2 on defense. He's a young kid. Rucker McGroarty, of course, got demoted down to the AHL about 3 games into the season, and he was expected to be the guy that maybe played with Sid late
Mhm.
in the season. I look at these young guys and I think to myself, it was never a stars have to carry the team with Mike Sullivan. When they won the cup back in 16 and 17, it was whether there's the HBK line, right? And Phil Kessel wasn't in his prime when he was in Pittsburgh. I think that without a question, Carl Hagelin, Nick Bonino, they're not necessarily first or second line players. You got a guy like Matt Cullen who could score goals. We talk all the time about Brian Rush, Jake Gensel, so many different guys that were rookies or second year players that were really, really helpful to this team that now all of a sudden you don't see that. And the guys who are getting called up, even Valtteri Puustinen, not having, he scored tonight, but other than that, almost invisible on the score sheet. And the other thing that I'm concerned about too is I think internally, maybe you can wipe away some of the issues that you have so that externally they don't get out. I think it becomes a panic move when you put Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin on the same line to start a game. I don't,
Mhm.
we've never seen Mike Sullivan, if he has to do that or if he's choosing to do that, to put Sid and Gino to me, Ryan, on the first line in a game to start with and have those line combos be out. That to me screams, I don't know what to do anymore. So I'm just going to put those two together and hope it sticks.
Yeah, I didn't realize it did that, to be honest with you. That
Yeah.
that that's a concern to me. Yeah, usually you'd see that like towards the end of the game if they're trying to fight for another goal, put their two obviously most talented players together. But yeah, I think he's reaching for spark somehow. Not getting it. I mean, I think the other thing. I mean, obviously you go back to like the Gensel trade last year. They get Michael Bunting for him. He hasn't done anything this year. Like that was a guy you really hoping coming into the year would be able to have like a full training camp with Sidney Crosby. He'd be the guy that'd be able to jump up on that top line with him and produce. Not getting that, so it is a concern. I think as you get your star players get older and you're not getting production from younger players, it's just recipe for poor play, a poor future too. I mean, that's the one thing that's a major concern for them moving forward is, what happens after, 3 years down the road, all these guys are 40 years old. Where do you go from there? Like it's a really tough job, I think right now for that coaching staff, that leadership of how you round out that team. Going forward, obviously this year it's already seems like it's slipping away a little bit. If you go 3-7, 3-8, like you're almost dead last in the NHL. Like I don't see any reason why you don't make a major change like that with that coaching staff. But yeah, it's we've talked about it a lot already. They play with our emotions, I think, every year. With they'll probably lose 6 in a row here, then they're going to go win 6 in a row, and then we're going to be talking the other way, like, hey, are they back? But we'll see. I mean, I think it's got to start here pretty soon within the next week. If you wait too much longer with Mike Sullivan, then you get to a point where why not just keep him to the end of the year? But I think it has to happen here in the next week or so for sure.
To me, the thing that we don't talk about much with the Penguins that maybe we should, especially after Tristan Jarry got demoted, is just the fact that the goaltending hasn't been great either. I think a lot
Mhm.
of the issues that plagued the Penguins in the last 2 years when they missed the playoffs are hurting now. They don't have a necessary. I mean, Alex Nedeljkovic played well at sports last year, but they didn't have a true number one goalie who they could trust. That's the same again this year. Yoel
Mhm.
Bloomquist in 5 games has an over 3 goals against average. Save percentage is down just above 9. But again, I think that's overinflated. Nedeljkovic hasn't won a game in 3 starts, and we know what happened with Tristan Jarry. The other thing too, Ryan, that when I look at this team, and it was the same thing again tonight. is they are notorious and have been for a few years, and I thought they might be able to rectify this season, and so far haven't. Every time they take a lead, there's this sense of inevitability they're going to give it up immediately. And we saw that tonight, right? They take a 2-0 lead, they score a power play goal, and then within a minute and 1 second or something of that nature in the first, Minnesota immediately ties the game. So to me, when lapses in judgment like that, and you're probably better to answer this than I am because you played, but lapses in judgment to me signify that the team doesn't trust in the process of what they're doing. They feel like maybe the goal spurts like it was tonight was luck, right? We're up by 2-0 because of a little bit of luck, but we still don't trust that we can do this. And I still am shocked. Granted, this core is aging, but when the three of these guys in Crosby, Malkin, and Letang have played together for 17 years, and you have another good piece of core around you, whether it's with guys you brought in or guys like Brian Rust who have been there for a while, that shouldn't happen. Am I wrong? I mean, like, I just your thoughts on that, because I think I just worry when it comes to this team that those lapses in judgment come because there's a distrust and a disconnect between coach and player.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just it comes down to the timing of the goals too. Like I think even look tonight, after they took the 2-goal lead, like you said, a minute to tie it up, but those goals are coming late in periods. They give up Minnesota takes the lead a minute into the second period. They score a fourth goal with a minute left in the second period. Like that timing to me is also kind of part of the problem. I think it was Vancouver that tied it up with 45 seconds left too. I think that does. I mean, I'm not going to say it's a full coaching issue, but maybe he's just not getting everybody to buy into to what they're trying to do. It just doesn't seem like they have much of an identity right now, especially when you lose, it becomes almost a habit. And you don't want to say that when you have a guy like Sidney Crosby there, who's, he came back, I think, this year because he believed in them, in the direction they were going, and they had a chance to kind of win again. But when it starts compounding early in the season, it's hard to find an identity. And it feels that way already from these guys. Like they don't, even if they get leads, they don't trust themselves anymore to keep them. They change the way they're playing for some reason. It's something's not clicking with them for sure. And again, when that happens, it's the only thing you can really do at that point. And I think you saw it from Edmonton last year is you change your head coach and see if you can get a spark that way. Because hard to change teams in season. You're not going to improve that much with any trade you might do at this point in the year. That happens in the off season. You have to bring in the right group, through free agency. They don't have the pieces even to really make trades that are going to improve the roster right now. So the only direction you can go, in my opinion, would be, making a change at that coaching position. But tough thing to do for Pittsburgh too, because you obviously want a couple Stanley Cups with Mike Sullivan. You think Mike Sullivan, you think the Penguins, the Stanley Cup run. So that's a hard thing. I understand they're in a tough spot, but if you look towards the future of the club, I think that's the only way you go at this point. But we'll see. They haven't been able to pull the trigger on that move in a couple of years now. So.
And we know traditionally Kyle Dubas, when you look at the Sheldon Keefe issue when he was in Toronto, he's not quick to fire coaches. I mean, he's giving Mike Sullivan the benefit of the doubt here. And I think that, in a way, to your point, Ryan, I mean, he's a coach that clearly has proven he can win. But as we know in the NHL, once you lose a locker room, you can't get it back. It's worse than football. It's worse than basketball. There is just no coming back from it. And I think that that's something that's a little concerning to me for the Penguins. You look at, okay, what other coaches might be out there unless you try to hire from within. There aren't that many retreads. I mean, the one that to me would pop off the page would be Gerard Gallant. But if that's the case, do you really think he can get this aging core to the playoffs? And if so, is he a guy you want on your bench for 5, 6, 7 years? Because traditionally he has not been a guy who is on a bench for more than 3 or 4 seasons. So we'll see. Penguins, again, sitting right now in action 4-3 against Minnesota in a game that, as Ryan pointed out, they really desperately need to win. They've lost 5 straight. They only have points in one of those last 5 games. Let's talk about Buffalo, Ryan, as we continue here on our Hockey Talk Tuesday podcast. Glad you're joining us here on the Gem City Sports Network, Facebook, YouTube, X, Twitch, and all of our podcast platforms. Make sure, by the way, to like, subscribe, leave a comment. Let us know how you like this podcast. We're having fun talking hockey on a Tuesday. Buffalo Sabres are starting to fill the net, Ryan. That's at least a positive.
Yeah, Tom. I mean, Tate Thompson scoring, and that's one thing going into the season. Like, where was he last year? If he was a guy that had his normal 45 goal season, they're probably a playoff team last year. Something didn't work for him last year, but it obviously has this year. So that's good to see. I mean, hopefully that's a testament to Lindy Ruff and what he's been doing with that young group, because he got the best out of the guys, and New Jersey was the best. Like those young players were really clicking and scoring at a pretty high rate.
And
Seems like he's found out with some of those guys up top. Still needs some guys like Dylan Cousins to find his game a little bit. He hasn't scored yet this year, but they're getting it in pieces. And if they can really get everybody on board and everybody starting to kind of produce like they are expected to, their team, like we talked about, they're the other side of the Penguins. They're a young team that has a really bright future. If they can kind of get the best out of these younger guys and continue to develop them.
I do think that we hit on a couple of players that were keys early in the year. Remember last episode, I asked you, I said, okay, give me a player or two that you think would be really huge for the Sabres to be able to produce. And I think we both landed on guys like JJ Peterka, who's got 8 points and 4 goals through just 8 games, of course, coming off the season early with the injury. Zach Benson really hasn't factored in. That's been a concern. He, of course, has been hurt too. But then you look at, okay, Alex Tuch is scoring again. Heck, Owen Power's got 8 points. He's third on the team, tied for third with Peterka for points. So the defense is providing some of the offense, and the Sabres have to be able to do that to be able to win games. They've won 3 of their last 4, Ryan. 4, 5, and 1 they sit. And yet, you know what the Sabres are to me? They're like whack-a-mole. They always have something that is just perfectly fine. In this case, it's the offense. It's rolling well. Thompson scoring, your stars are there. Lindy Ruff is clearly making impressive strides with this offense. And the defense is always going to be fine, and the defense is great. But then you look at their goaltending, which was the strength last year with UPL, and you look at the numbers and you think, what on earth is going on with the Sabres goaltender? He's 3-3-1. His goals against average is nearing 3.5. He's got an under 900 save percentage. What happened to UPL this season, Ryan? And from your perspective as a goaltender, because we didn't expect this at all.
Yeah, I think, it's tough to find that mix of where you're getting offense and you're getting defense to kind of click on the same page. And that might be just, again, a Lindy Ruff system coming in. Maybe guys aren't on the same page in their end, which is, you have to take care of that part of the ice first. I'm not a guy that's ever going to blame the goalie for things that go wrong. I've been on that side of things. And even though he's not his best right now, I still feel like if you look at some of the recent games, I know they just lost to Florida. I think he gave up 5 against Florida. They had a couple good spurts there. I think they gave up 2 goals, 1 goal, maybe that 3-game winning streak they were on. He was playing okay, getting better. Then kind of takes a step back, but maybe for him, maybe he just, he had a really strong season last year, but they really relied heavily on him. And he found a good groove. Might take a little bit of time here for him to get back into that motion this year, but and I think if you look at some of the losses too, and there was a couple games where he gave up 6 goals. That hurts your stats. I mean, it's easy to look at stats again and say, okay, his goals against is 3.5. But if you look, I think maybe 3 games, he's given up 6 goals. The other, he's at 2. So he just has to find a way to be more consistent. I think that's what it comes down to. Cut out those bad games. I mean, every once in a while it's okay. But if you played 7 games and 2 or 3 of them giving up 6 goals, that's not a consistent goaltender. So, he just has to find his rhythm. I think that'll come for him as the team kind of grows and gets more confident. I always am a believer in doing things the right way, trusting the process, and the results will start to come. That comes for every position and the team as a whole. So I think he'll get there. I think it's clear that he's still their guy. I don't think you've seen anything from Devin Levi that's showing me that he's ready for that yet. So I think he'll start to play a lot more here at UPL as the season goes on and find that rhythm again.
I did want to ask you about Devin Levi because you answered my question, do you start playing him more? I agree with you. I don't think he's still quite ready yet, but I also think the experience that Lindy Ruff has, I think there's an understanding that you've got to get at some point Devin reps before you say that you write him off and you cast him off to whatever island that you want to cast him off to. Yeah. He's traditionally played the end of the back-to-backs. He played the Global Series against New Jersey. He played on October 12th after the Pittsburgh game, I believe it was. And then on the 17th is his last start. But is there a way to incorporate Devin to give him opportunities without compromising UPL's mental stability in the net? Is that something that can happen? And if so, how would you go about that, knowing that I think Buffalo still believes that Devin's the guy, but the last thing you want to do is damage the guy you just extended in the offseason.
Yeah, that's the trickiest thing I think for a coach is finding that balance. between starting goalie and backup goalie, because you need both guys. You never know what's going to happen if UPL plays the next 20 games, gets hurt. Like, how's Devin Levi going to come in and kind of save the day after he's been sitting? Even if he plays one or two, though. So that's the trickiest part. I think these guys, they're both young in their career, so they need to kind of understand, managing your workload. Making sure when if you're not playing, especially for a guy like Levi, how important practices are. Making sure you're getting those game reps as much as you can in practice. And same for UPL when he's not playing. I mean, they're both young; they can both play. If they're playing their game, like from a performance and like fatigue standpoint, I don't see any reason why a guy like UPL can't play 60 plus games in this league and still have fresh legs towards the end of the year. That's one thing that's important, but it's the trickiest thing, I think, is finding that good balance. And early in the year, you'd like to kind of go maybe every other game, maybe give a guy every 2 games. That's the one thing I think from a goalie perspective is really hard. Like for Devin Levi, you have to find a rhythm somehow. And if you're playing one game, sitting for 2, sitting for 3, playing another game, that's so hard to find a rhythm. So I think early in the year here, as a team starting to score more, you can trust them to win games with their scoring. Maybe give Devin 2 games in a row, maybe give UPL 2 games in a row, see kind of how that goes, see if anybody kind of picks up a little bit of rhythm. And then maybe that's a system you can roll with here for a little while. If you go 2-2 and they're both playing well throughout that flow, why mix it up? As the year goes on, as you probably get past Christmas into January, February, that's when you probably want to establish a guy that's going to be your starter in the playoffs. Because even if you have, you've seen it with Boston, I think, where they 50-50 split their guys over the past few years. You're still going to need a starter in the playoffs like that. You need a guy that's going to be able to kind of get in that rhythm and play 25 games in a month and a half in the playoffs. So, I think for them, I wouldn't be totally opposed to seeing Devin play 2 in a row here, even though he's struggling a little bit. See if you can find a little bit of spark.
The only advantage that the Sabres and the Penguins, more so Buffalo, have is that no one's really running away with the East currently. There's not a team, maybe outside of Florida, that you look at and you say, okay, they're really controlling the game. I think Tampa's done a good job with the Gensel acquisition. They're playing well second to the Atlantic. But then Buffalo's sitting right now on a logjam of 4 teams tied with 9 points. So it's not like there's a gigantic separation. Even for Pittsburgh, they've got 2 games in hand on New Jersey. If they're somehow able to come back tonight, win their next one, they're 3 points clear. Not clear, but 3 points within first place. You never know. I think the situation is certainly better for Buffalo right now than it is with Pittsburgh. And who knows, by the time we talk on Tuesday next week, Ryan, this team could have a new head coach.
Yeah, it could completely flip the other way again. It's been back and forth with these 2 teams for the past couple of years. So hopefully one just really able to find their game and just kind of establish themselves as an actual playoff team, because they've both just been fringe teams for too long now, I feel like.
Lord, we hope so. And we hope so for the Penguins and Sabres fans around here. They can rebound. Adam Ripley thinks the Otters can regroup. They're fine, Adam. They're still in the good spot. It's early in the season. I think maybe I was a little overzealous in my ill insight into the Otters tonight, but nonetheless, more games coming up this weekend. And great stuff, Ryan. This was fun to come back this week. Enjoy Halloween, man. I'll tell you what, the weather's been great. I want to say when we went to Zubu last week, I got lucky. I went in the back entrance. Ryan was telling me that the line was like an hour out the door. It's been beautiful.
Yeah, I don't think this is normal in Erie in late October. And I think today was a record high, 75, but probably on Thursday it'll be back into the 40s for the kids when they're out trick-or-treating, of course.
Oh, it always works that way. Yeah. And then Friday for high school football will be in for your guys' road game out in Canada. I'm sure it'll be in the 30s as well. Well, we hope to be back next Tuesday. Of course, we know next Tuesday is election night, so we'll keep you updated on the days of when our podcast might be. But we do plan to be back next week and every week that we can for this Hockey Talk Tuesday podcast. All right, for Ryan Zapolsky, I'm Isaac Petcash. We're out. Enjoy your Tuesday. See if the Penguins can come back. Until then, enjoy the rest of your week.